Chapter 16. Rudy glanced up at the ceiling of his parents' basement rec room. Those water pipes out there will be perfect, he thought. The Thrill Club will love this. This will be the most awesome prank of the year. Rudy heard footsteps and turned toward the sound. His 8-year-old brother Pete was standing at the foot of the basement stairs, peering at Rudy through his thick glasses. "Hey," called Pete, "what are you doing with that big rope?" Rudy stepped onto a folding chair and tossed one end of the rope over the exposed pipe. He tied a knot in the rope and stepped down, admiring his handiwork. "This is going to be so cool. I can't wait to see their faces." "Hey, Pete, look," he told his brother excitedly. "You know the ventriloquist dummy Dad picked up at that garage sale? The one with the bow tie and all those freckles? The one that's almost as big as you are? The one that's almost as big as you are?" Pete nodded. He couldn't take his eyes off the dangling rope. "Well," Rudy continued, "the Thrill Club is coming over for tonight's meeting. When they get here, I'm going to have the room real dark so it's hard to see, and that dummy is going to be hanging from that overhead pipe, with a noose tied around his neck." Pete's eyes widened. "Pretty funny," Pete said. He would never allow himself to show any real enthusiasm for any trick of Rudy's. Too many of Rudy's tricks were played on him. Pete put both hands around his own throat and pretended to choke. I'm hanging, he cried. Rudy laughed. His little brother always cracked him up. "Everyone will come down into the dark and bump into the dummy hanging from the ceiling," Rudy said gleefully. "They'll freak. They really will." "Can I watch?" Pete asked eagerly. "Sure," said Rudy. "You can hide in the closet. It'll be a riot." "Great!" Pete stared up at the rope. "Don't tell Mom and Dad," Rudy warned. "No problem," Pete replied. He scampered back up the steps, leaving Rudy alone with his project. Rudy opened the closet and pulled out the dummy. It was so real-looking, Rudy almost felt as if they could have a conversation. "Hey, pal," he said, reaching out to shake the dummy's wooden hand. "How have you been? Enjoying your stay in the closet? Dark enough for you in there?" The dummy didn't answer. He just stared at Rudy with his glassy eyes and painted-on smile. "All right," thought Rudy, "be that way." "For the crime of rudeness," he told the dummy, "I sentence you to hang by the neck until you die." The dummy didn't seem to mind. He just sat there in his little plaid coat and bow tie, grinning his eternal grin. Rudy set the dummy on the couch. "Your Honor," he said, addressing an imaginary judge, "the defendant shows no remorse." Rudy climbed back up onto the folding chair, grabbed the loose end of the rope, and began fashioning it into a noose. He had been a scout and earned a merit badge for not tying. Now his training came in handy. When he was done, the noose dangled ominously from the pipe, waiting for a victim. "This is going to be way cool," Rudy thought again. He picked up the dummy and carried him over to the noose. He tried to slip the rope over the wooden head, but it wouldn't fit. "Darn, I made it too small." He set the dummy down and climbed back up on the chair. Carefully, he retied the noose. This time, the opening was large enough. On an impulse, out of curiosity, Rudy slipped it over his own head. The rope hung loosely around his neck. "See," he called to the dummy down below. "There's nothing to it." The dummy grinned up at Rudy in silent agreement. Balancing on the folding chair, Rudy reached out to remove the noose. "Hey!" He struggled a bit and accidentally pulled on the knot. The noose tightened. "Hey!" Frightened, Rudy really started to lose his balance now. "Hey!" The rope tightened more, cutting deep into his throat. "Pete," he choked. "Pete, can you hear me?" Silence. "Pete?" The only sound was the creaking of the pipe over his head. "Help! Somebody! I can't breathe!" Clawing at the rope, he kicked back. He saw the dummy grinning up at him, a ghoulish, gleeful grin. And then Rudy felt the chair move as it fell out from under him. "Ah!" Rudy's final gasping cry as he sprung over the floor, tearing helplessly at the noose until everything went black. Chapter 17. "Excellent!" exclaimed Talia. Seth beamed at the compliment. "That's an excellent horror story," Talia repeated, shaking her head in admiration. "Really outstanding." Seth continued to grin, pleased by her reaction. "I know I'm not as good a writer as you, but I'm getting better." Talia stared at the horrible mask on the coffee table. "The story is great, but I feel uncomfortable," she confessed. "About what?" Seth demanded. "I really don't want to read a story to the Thrill Club using Rudy's name. You know, after what happened to Chandel." "But, Talia, can't we just change the name, use Rick instead of Rudy, or something like that?" Talia suggested. "Why?" asked Seth. He seemed surprised by her suggestion. "Why?" Talia was flabbergasted. "Because it will just make everyone think of Chandel. Most of them already suspect that I killed her," she added glumly. Seth's mouth curled into a thoughtful smile. "That's why I think we should keep Rudy's name in," Seth said. If you read this story tomorrow night, people will understand that you're innocent. Talia didn't follow his reasoning. Seth was smart, but his mind worked in strange ways. How? She demanded. How could reading a story about Rudy accidentally hanging himself prove anything about what happened to Chandel? Simple, declared Seth. By reading another story with a real name in it, you'll prove to everyone that you have nothing to hide, that you don't have a guilty conscience, that everything is the same as always. Talia nodded thoughtfully. What Seth said made a certain kind of sense. There's only one problem, she said. Seth raised his eyebrows. What's that? Rudy will hate it, Talia said. He'll think I'm out to get him or something. Seth shook his head. No way. You know Rudy has a great sense of humor. Besides, it'll ruin the story if you change the name. Everyone knows that Rudy is the guy with the noose. He rigs that noose up in his rec room every single time we hold the meeting at his house. He'll think the story is a riot. Really, Talia. Talia didn't know what to think. She wanted to read the story, but the final picture was just so gross. Rudy dangling, grasping at the noose, choking for air, the dummy grinning up at him. Should I read it or not, she asked herself. I have until tomorrow night to decide. After school the next afternoon, Talia stared into the darkness of her locker. I'm forgetting something, she thought. What is it that I'm supposed to bring home? A hand fell on her shoulder, and she jumped. Rudy pulled his hand away. Whoa, sorry. He seemed startled by her reaction. I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to say hello. Talia felt foolish. She smiled sheepishly. It's okay, Rudy. I'm so stressed out these days. I jump at anything. Rudy nodded sympathetically. He's so cute, Talia thought, blushing at the memory of their kiss. Neither of them had mentioned it in the days since it happened. We're just friends, she reminded herself. It will have to stay that way. Anyway, said Rudy, I just wanted to make sure you were coming to the Thrill Club meeting at my house tonight. It wouldn't be the same without you. Of course I'm coming, Talia exclaimed. I wouldn't miss it for anything. She lowered her voice. Do you need any help? Can I bring anything? Do anything? Are you going to put up any creepy decorations? Oh yeah, Rudy said with a wink. I have something scary planned. He's putting up his noose again, Talia told herself. If you want, I could come over early and help you set everything up, she offered. Really? Rudy seemed excited. Thanks, I'm dying to hear your new story. Talia's heart sank. The image of Rudy's head in a tightening noose flashed before her eyes. Do I really want to read that story? I'm not so sure about this new story, Talia said truthfully. I may not read it at all. You have to, Rudy insisted. Your stories are the best part of our meetings. Well, said Talia reluctantly, maybe I'll read it to you first and see what you think. She touched Rudy softly on the arm. What time should I come over? How about 6, suggested Rudy. That should give us enough time to put up the decorations and read the story. Great, Talia grinned. See you tonight. Spring had finally arrived. The afternoon was bright and sunny. The air smelled sweet and fresh. Daffodils bloomed. Fresh leaves were beginning to unfurl on the trees. It's so beautiful, Talia thought, wandering through Shadyside Park after school. A fresh start. Maybe everything will be all right after all. She heard footsteps rushing behind her and spun around to see who it was. Mara came jogging up the path. She stopped when she caught up with Talia. She was breathing hard, her cheeks ruddy from the exercise. Talia, she gasped. Where did you ever learn to walk so fast? I've been chasing you for 3 blocks. Why were you chasing me? Talia asked suspiciously. Is something wrong? Not really. Mara caught her breath and smiled. I just wanted to talk to you about something. Rudy, Talia thought. She must have been the one who saw Rudy and me kissing in the gym. Talia braced herself. Talk to me, she asked casually. About what? Talia, Mara began. I know we're not the best of friends, and I know it's really none of my business, but I'm worried about Seth. About Seth? Talia bristled. Mara has no right to poke her nose into my relationship with Seth. She spoke sharply. What about Seth, Mara? Mara hesitated. Well, I think he's cracking up, Talia. I'm so worried about him. I think he's totally losing it. Chapter 18. Mara, what are you talking about? Talia demanded shrilly. Mara took a deep breath. Well, from my bedroom window, I can see into his room. All he does is pace, at night, back and forth, sometimes all night long. He seems to be terribly stoked about something. Talia gaped at her. He paces all night? Mara nodded. Yeah, and he does these weird things. He waves his arm around like he's talking to himself, and when he's not pacing, he sits at his desk going through papers and tapes. I guess they must be his father's. It's like he's obsessed or something. Wow, Talia murmured. Mara frowned. I care about Seth, Talia. I just thought you should know about him, about how strange he's acting. Talia could picture it. Poor Seth, haunted by the death of his father, trying to understand a terrible tragedy. But Mara had no right to intrude on his private grief, even if she was his next-door neighbor and could see into his bedroom window. Is that all? Talia snapped. You chased me for 3 blocks to tell me that you've been spying on my boyfriend. Maybe you should get a life, Mara. Maybe you should just pull down your shades and leave Seth alone. The color returned to Mara's cheeks. She sounded really hurt. You don't understand, Talia. I just wanted you to know so you could help him. He's your boyfriend. I accept that. It's just that I still care about him as a friend. Talia could feel herself losing control. Oh, I understand, she said shrilly. I understand perfectly. You're spying on my boyfriend and following me around. Maybe you should mind your own business for a change. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mara replied, staring unhappily at the ground. She ran her fingers through her red hair. I was only trying to help. She looked up, frowning at Talia. Maybe we should just cancel the meeting tonight. Maybe we've had enough thrills for a while. I think we could all use a rest. It's too late to cancel it, Talia said quickly. Which reminds me, I've got to run, Mara. I promised Rudy I'd get to his house early to help him get ready. What? Mara seemed shocked. You're going early to Rudy's? Whoops, thought Talia. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned that. Well, too bad for Mara. If she can stay home and spy on Seth, then I can help Rudy prepare for the meeting. Talia turned and walked away. She could feel Mara's eyes on her, burning into her back. Nessa couldn't wait to get to the thrill club meeting at Rudy's. I need to do something fun, she told herself. Life has been so grim lately. All I do is sit around and brood about Chandel. Walking briskly through the warm evening air, the sun just dipping behind the trees, she tried to predict what Rudy would have hanging from the noose on his ceiling. He had hinted to her earlier that night's prop would be his best ever, though Nessa couldn't believe that anything could outdo the lifelike mannequin he'd used for the last meeting. She smiled to herself, remembering the shock of it. A man in a business suit, swaying back and forth above the floor. A look of pure shock frozen on his plastic face. It was so gross. They all made jokes about it the whole evening. Oh well, she thought, better not underestimate Rudy. He's got a really great imagination. When Nessa arrived at Rudy's, she found Mara and Seth standing on the front porch, puzzled expressions on their faces. Hey, what's up? Nessa greeted them eagerly. Did you ring the bell? Seth nodded. He was wearing his black jeans and camouflage shirt, his usual outfit. He reached up and scratched his head. 3 times, he replied, and Rudy still hasn't answered. What's his problem? Mara said huffily. He knows we're coming. Where are his parents? Nessa asked. Rudy told me today they were going to take Pete to a Cub Scout meeting, said Mara. She pressed her finger against the doorbell and held it there for a long time. Rudy will have to hear this. They waited another minute or so. Nessa pressed her face against the door to peer inside. Maybe this is part of the joke, she suddenly realized. The door's open, she pointed out after jiggling the handle. Why don't we let ourselves in? Let's give him another minute or 2, Seth suggested. It doesn't seem right to barge into someone's house. They stood impatiently on the porch, trading nervous smiles in the warm spring evening. A blue car drove slowly past the house, country music blasting from its open windows. They watched it vanish around the corner. Seth chewed anxiously on his fingernails. I hope Talia gets here soon. She's supposed to be here already, Mara informed them in a peevish voice. She told me she was coming over early to help Rudy decorate. I'm sure they're down there. I can't understand why they're making us wait like this. Nessa tried to conceal her surprise. What was Talia doing alone in the basement with Rudy, while Mara waited outside? It seemed a bit suspicious, to say the least. Especially the way Talia had been acting lately, calling her to say she wanted to break up with Seth, then denying it had ever happened. Nessa reached for the door. What are we waiting for? She demanded. Let's go down there and see what's keeping them. Seth held the door open so the girls could enter first. Nessa blinked to get used to the darkness of the house. A strange silence hung in the air as they passed through the kitchen on their way to the cellar door. They paused at the top of the stairs. Rudy, Mara called out. Talia, are you down there? No reply. Mara turned to Nessa with a confused expression on her face. I can't understand it, she said. They were supposed to be here. Nessa bit her lip and tried to think. Maybe they went to the store or something, she speculated. We're here, Seth said decisively. We might as well check out the basement. They made their way downstairs single file, with Nessa bringing up the rear. The wooden steps creaked beneath their weight. At the bottom of the stairs, they turned right to enter the rec room. Nessa heard the others gasp before she saw the body. Then she saw Rudy. Hanging from the overhead pipes, a clean white rope knotted tightly around his neck. His face seemed enormous above the noose, purple and twisted with horror. Mara brought her hands to her mouth to stifle a cry. She wobbled a little, as if she might faint. Sensing her anguish, Nessa reached out and grabbed her by the arm. "He hanged himself," Seth murmured, his eyes riveted on the gruesome sight. Nessa felt her stomach quiver. "Oh," Mara moaned. Then, without warning, Nessa began to laugh. High, giddy laughter. She couldn't stop. Chapter 19. Nessa laughed so hard her stomach began to hurt. Seth and Mara gaped at her in shock. "Nessa, what's wrong with you?" Mara cried. Nessa struggled to catch her breath. She ignored Mara's question. "Okay, Rudy," she sputtered. "You can come down now." A heavy silence fell over the room. The only sound was the creaking of the ceiling pipes. Seth's mouth dropped open, but no sound came out. Mara's eyes narrowed at Nessa. "Nessa, stop laughing," Mara choked out. "Don't you see? It's a joke," Nessa cried, tears of laughter running down her pale cheeks. "Rudy told me he was cooking up something extra special for tonight's meeting." "Nessa, no," Mara whispered. Rudy swayed over the carpet, his face purple in the fluorescent light. "Come down, Rudy," Nessa called. "You fooled us. Come down now." She turned to Mara and Seth. "It's a joke, guys. Don't you see?" "Nessa, please. It's no joke," Mara stammered. Seth swallowed hard, his eyes on the swaying body. Nessa's stomach tightened with fear. "Yes, it is," she insisted. "It's a joke. It has to be." She took a step toward the body. "Rudy, how did you get your face so purple?" she cried. "How did you do it, Rudy? Tell us." Then she turned back to her two horrified friends. "It's a joke. I'm telling you, it's a joke," she insisted, suddenly shrill and uncertain. Mara didn't reply. She walked unsteadily over to the body. She grabbed hold of Rudy's arm and pulled it away from his body. The expression on Rudy's distorted face didn't change. Mara let go of the arm. It dropped limply, lifelessly, back to his side. "It's no joke," Mara repeated softly, gazing up at her boyfriend's purple face. "Oh, Rudy," she whimpered, "who did this to you?" As though her legs couldn't hold her up, Mara dropped slowly to her knees and hid her face in her hands. Nessa felt as if she couldn't breathe. The shriek she made seemed to come from somewhere outside of herself. "He's dead," she heard herself screaming. "Rudy's dead. What is happening to us?" Nessa's knees buckled and she started to sway. Seth caught her in his arms, holding on tightly to his shoulders. Nessa began to cry as well. The basement room echoed with the wailing of their grief. Seth patted Nessa softly on the back, trying to comfort her. "Someone, call the police," Mara whispered through her tears. "We've got to get help." Seth walked Nessa slowly over to the couch and lowered her to the cushion. "Where's the phone?" he asked, glancing quickly around the room. "Upstairs," Mara sobbed, still kneeling by Rudy's body. "Please, get help." Seth touched his hand to Nessa's cheek. Nessa couldn't stop crying. She felt hot tears running down her face. "Just close your eyes and sit tight," Seth instructed her. "I'm going to run upstairs and call the police. I'll be back in a minute." Nessa watched through her tear-blurred eyes as Seth took 2 quick steps toward the stairs, then froze. His eyes widened. He yelped in surprise. "Talia." Nessa gasped as Talia stumbled out of the shadows beneath the stairwell. Her blonde hair hung across her face in a wild tangle. She seemed dazed, unaware of her surroundings. Her eyes were unfocused as she moved unsteadily into the light with a strange, vacant smile on her face. She held her hands awkwardly in front of her, the fingers bent like claws. "Talia," Seth cried, "we thought." He broke off in mid-sentence, staring at her hands. "Your hands," he gasped. "What's the matter with your hands? They're all red and cut. Are those rope burns?" Chapter 20. The nurse poked her head into the clean white room. "Talia," she said in a friendly voice, "you have a visitor." Talia sat up in bed, smoothing the front of her wrinkled cotton nightgown. She hurriedly tried to fix her hair, but then abandoned the effort. "What's the point?" she thought. "After what I've done, who cares what my hair looks like? Why would anyone ever want to see me again?" She stared blankly at her bandaged hands. She didn't look up until she heard the voice. "Talia." Seth stood shyly in the doorway, watching her with his gentle eyes. "It's me." Talia couldn't help but smile. It was so good to see him again. "I feel as if I've been in this hospital for months." Seth waited in the doorway. He seemed reluctant to approach her. She patted the mattress. "Come here," she said teasingly. "I promise I won't bite." Seth crossed the small room, sat down on the edge of the bed and took her hand. Except for her parents, he was her first visitor. She had been admitted to St. Elizabeth's 5 days before. The loony bin, she thought bitterly. My new home. What's up? He asked, forcing a smile. Are they treating you okay? Not bad, she said truthfully. They've been giving me all these tests to see if I'm a psycho. They make me stare at ink blots and tell them what I see. Stuff like that. Seth frowned. They ask me a lot of questions about my dreams and things I remember from my childhood, Talia continued. Otherwise, they leave me alone. I read, watch TV, and take lots of naps. Seth squeezed her hand. Thank you for coming, Talia thought. Thank you for not giving up on me. I need you, Seth. You're the only real friend I have left. You know I'd never hurt anyone. So, what happens next? He asked, his eyes taking in the room. Do you know when they're going to let you out of here? Maybe tomorrow, she said with a shrug. There's a hearing in juvenile court in 3 weeks. In the meantime, they're letting me go home in the custody of my parents. That's great, Seth said. Does that mean they think you're innocent? No way, Talia thought. No one thinks I'm innocent. Not even me. Not with all the evidence against me. She lowered her eyes to the bandages swaddling her hands, her rope-burned hands. The hands that had somehow pulled a noose tight around Rudy's neck. If only she could remember. Why are there still these gigantic blank spots in my memory, she asked herself. Not even the doctors can explain that. She looked at Seth and shook her head sadly. It's just the way the system works, she told him. I'm innocent until proven guilty. And all the judges know my mom. They trust her even if they don't trust me. The thing is, sometimes I think I'm guilty too. Seth shook his head. You can't think that way, he insisted. It's like giving up. Talia felt so confused. Every time she thought about what had happened, her head started to spin. Everything pointed to the conclusion that she was a murderer. Everything but her own memory. I never wanted to hurt Chandel, she told herself. And Rudy was one of the sweetest people I knew. Why would I even dream of hurting Rudy? It's so horrible, she blurted out. I can't remember killing Chandel or Rudy, but that bloody knife in my dresser and those fresh rope burns in my hands, she shut her eyes. Every time Talia thought about her hands, she thought she would totally lose it. Did I really kill my friends with my own 2 hands? Am I some kind of sick evil monster? I guess I did it, Seth. I guess I killed both of them. There's no other explanation. But why? And if I killed them, why don't I remember it? Once again, Seth glanced around the hospital room. Talia followed his gaze. The TV in the corner. The window out the far wall. He seemed to be searching for a way out, as if he thought she might attack him next. Oh, Seth, please don't be afraid of me. Look at me, she thought. Please look at me. But he just kept staring at the window. Don't worry, he said in a hesitant, unconvincing voice. Your mother is a good lawyer, and she must know other lawyers. She'll figure a way out to... His voice trailed off. To what, she wondered. To keep me from going to jail for the rest of my life? To keep me from ending up in a straitjacket? Talia waited for Seth to finish the thought, but he just glanced at his watch. Oh no, Seth groaned. I didn't realize it was this late. I've really got to be going. So soon, Talia cried. But Seth, you just got here. Seth jumped off the bed. He avoided her stare. I'm sorry, Talia. It's just that I have to be somewhere in 10 minutes. I have to meet someone. Somewhere? Someone? Why so vague? Talia wondered. What is he hiding from me? Anyway, Seth told her in a falsely cheerful voice, you'll be home soon, right? I'll visit you there. Right, Talia thought. She suddenly felt terribly lonely. At least kiss me goodbye, she silently pleaded with him. Let me know you still care. But Seth casually raised his hand and waved goodbye from the door. Talia had to bite her lip to keep from crying. Take it easy, he said, and disappeared into the hallway. Talia had never felt so betrayed, so totally alone. What am I going to do, she asked herself. Seth was the only one left who cared about me, and now even he thinks I'm a murderer. She threw down the covers and hopped off the bed. Her head spinning, she crossed the room to the window. She gazed down at the hospital parking lot. It was another beautiful spring day. Tiny puffs of clouds floated in the bright sky. Talia wanted to be outside, enjoying the sun and fresh air. But instead I'm stuck here, she thought, in a hospital for crazy people. Lowering her eyes, she suddenly saw Seth walking quickly through the rows of cars in the parking lot. A red-haired girl stepped out from behind a station wagon to greet him. Oh no, Talia thought, squinting to see better. It can't be. Mara. Seth and Mara. Mara and Seth. Talia shook her head, as if trying to shake away the scene below her window. But when she peered down again, the 2 of them remained. Mara and Seth stood close together in the middle of the parking lot. They spoke for a short time, and then Mara put her arm around Seth's shoulder. They walked together to Seth's car, walked together like a couple, the couple they used to be. Talia staggered away from the window, stunned by the betrayal. So Mara wanted Seth back all along, she thought bitterly. I should have known. I should have seen that Mara wanted him back. Then a chilling thought made Talia drop back onto her bed. How badly did Mara want Seth back? How much did she want me out of the way? Enough to kill for him? And make it look as if it were me? Chapter 21. Later that night, long past midnight, Talia struggled to keep her eyes open. She wanted to finish the book she was reading before going to sleep. Talia had read 6 books since entering the hospital. Reading was the only thing that kept her sane, the only activity that reminded her of the life she had had. As she read, the letters began to blur on the page, mixing in strange nonsense patterns. She blinked her eyes again and again, until the letters finally stopped swirling. There, she thought, that's better. Hearing footsteps in the hall, she glanced up. Usually the hospital was silent as a morgue late at night. The footsteps stopped outside her door. She heard whispers, a creak of the door, then the sound of her own muffled cry. Hey! 2 teenagers stepped into Talia's room, a white boy and an African-American girl. Both were dressed in white hospital gowns. They padded softly across the floor until they were standing right next to her bed. They grinned at her, strange, leering grins. "Well, what do you want?" Talia stammered, closing her book and raising herself on the pillow. They didn't reply. Their grins grew wider. Talia could hear their breathing, more like groaning. "Are you patients here?" Talia asked, feeling cold fear run down her back. They stared at her, breathing hard. The boy giggled, a high-pitched, childish giggle. "Are you in the wrong room?" Talia asked. The boy giggled again. The girl reached out and touched Talia's hair. "Please," Talia murmured. "Can you go back to your own rooms? Do you need help?" The girl petted Talia's hair as if petting a dog, gently at first, then harder. "Stop, please," Talia insisted, feeling another shudder of fear. "Please!" The boy let out another childish giggle. "Want to play? Want to play with us?" He brought his face close to hers. "No," Talia said. "We can play with your hair," the girl said in a surprisingly husky voice. She grabbed a strand of Talia's hair and held on. "Let go!" Talia cried, trying to pull free. The girl grasped the hair tighter. "Play with her hair, play with her hair," the boy chanted, his shoulders bouncing up and down. "Nice hair," the girl said, her grin widening. "Nice hair." "Please," Talia begged, overcome with fear. "Please!" She stared up at them, at their wild, unblinking eyes, at their wide grins, and suddenly recognized them. Rudy and Chandel. You're here!" Talia cried, as they moved in to attack her.